This is the John Deere 314 garden tractor that I bought about a month ago now. I've been doing some basic maintenance on it the last few weeks. Did an oil change, I changed the air filter, cleaned up one of the battery terminals, and now I am ready to change the transmission fluid and filter. The tractor came with the original manual, and I've gone over the instructions here for this. Looks pretty simple. The first thing I did was let the tractor run for a little bit, run for a few minutes just to warm the oil up, and then I backed it up here on some ramps to park it on an incline. That's what the manual suggests doing. I guess that helps the fluid drain more easily. And I put some wedges up here in the front to keep it from rolling forward, although the parking brake seems to do a good enough job at that. So if we look here under the tractor, what we're going to be doing is changing the filter. So that's this right here. And then the transmission fluid, the way that we're going to drain the fluid is we're going to disconnect the cooling tube that goes from the transmission up here down to the axle down here. As you can see, I still have the mowing deck attached. I'm guessing that if we disconnected the mowing deck and removed it, it would make this process a lot easier and probably cleaner, because the filter hovers right above the deck. So when we remove that, some fluid's going to pour out. But I am not going to bother disconnecting the mowing deck. I'm just going to use this little plastic container here to kind of hover under the filter when I remove the filter to catch any fluid that pours out of there. And you can see I've got a drainage pan located right here under the cooling tube, which should catch the transmission fluid that comes out of there. All right, so a couple of things about taking off the cooling tube in my scenario. I don't know what size that is, but it's definitely bigger than the 3/4 inch wrenches that I have. So I am going to use a crescent wrench to remove those tubes, that tube. But before I do that, I am going to clean off some of the grime that's built up around the tubes, just because I don't want that grime getting into the tube or somehow getting into the system. I'm just going to take a rag here and kind of clean up around that. I don't think it has to be perfect, but if you can get some of that grime away, I think it's always nice to do. So that looks pretty good. There's not too much grime right there on the area. And I'll do the same thing up here where it connects to the transmission. Just kind of wipe that off. All right. Okay, so next I'm going to use the crescent wrench in here, and I'm going to take the connection off where it goes into the axle first, because that's where we're going to get most of the drainage, I think. So you can see that kind of came off pretty easily. It might be tight. You got to make sure you go counterclockwise. But the fluid looks pretty good. It's actually not very grimy. So I think they must have done a good job keeping this clean, which is a good sign. So while the system is draining here, I'll just show you what I bought for replacement. This is the low viscosity high guard transmission fluid, the official John Deere stuff. I don't know if there's another fluid that you can use, but I definitely would stick with the factory recommendations on this. And I mean, it's not cheap, but I trust it. So that's what we used. I bought 5 quarts of that. That's what the specs call for. And while we're waiting for this to drain here, I'm going to work on the filter next. The filter up here. Again, it's a John Deere filter. This is the number for the 314. I'm not sure if it's different for other models, but it's just an oil filter. So you can see the fluid is almost drained out of the axle now. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect it from the transmission up here, right underneath the filter, and drain that into my little small white container, since I can fit that up there between the mowing deck and the transmission. Alright, so I've gotten the tube completely disconnected. You can see it draining here from both the transmission and from the axle. I'm just going to let that continue to drain. I'm catching it in this little white container, and then once I get that completely drained, I'm going to go ahead and remove the filter. Here's the cooling tube removed. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up while I have it out here, remove a little bit more of the grime on it, so that when we put it back in, it'll be all nice and clean. While I'm waiting for the transmission and axle to drain, I'm going to come back here and just kind of wipe off this indicator tube a little bit. This is where you can see how much oil you've got in your transmission. The tube can get pretty dusty. I'm not sure if the yellowing is you know, the way it always is, or if the tube at some point in its life was white, but it's pretty yellow now. So I'm just trying to get it as clear as possible. Okay, so the transmission and axle are just about completely drained. Got a little bit of dripping coming out of the axle still, but that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the filter. And again, since that's a two-handed job, I'm going to have to turn the camera off for that. But I'm basically going to try to do this with my hand. Hopefully the filter doesn't look too old, so hopefully it was just hand tightened on there and not very tight. You know, if it is tight, you're going to have to use an oil filter wrench to get that off, but you're not supposed to tighten it too much, and when you put it back on, just hand tighten it, and you'll be good to go. So I did try to take that off with my hand, and it's a little too tight for me, so I'm going to have to use an oil filter wrench. Fortunately, I have one that's going to fit. This #1 filter wrench, which I use for my Jeep, is a perfect fit. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to take the filter off, let that drain, and then we'll come back while I put the filter on. So I'm on the other side of the tractor now. I just wanted to show you what I ended up doing here. So because I have the mower deck still attached, it's a little tight getting up there to the oil filter. So I ended up using one of these ratchets that has a kind of a swivel head on it, and that works a lot better. So you can see here, you know, if I just had a straight wrench, I'm not going to have much room to work with. But with one of these swivel wrenches, I can get right up in there and turn this, and you can see that rotating, and you see some crud falling out there. I can take that off by hand now. So we'll slowly take that off. You can see the oil starting to drip down. And then once we get that screwed off all the way, I'm going to drain it right into this container. You can see there's a good bit of oil in there. If you don't have a pan under there, you're going to have quite a mess. So we'll drain all that out. I'm really glad to see that oil looking so good. I think they must have changed it fairly regularly. It's always nice to see that when you buy a tractor that's you know, 30 some years old. So we're good. We got the filter off. Looks good. And I'm going to head back over to the other side, get the other filter, and start working on putting that in, and then we'll get the new oil in. Alright, we have the old filter here and the new filter. You can see the numbers match up, so that's good. If you do a lot of oil changes, you know some tips to installing a filter. You're going to want to take some of the new oil and smear it around here on this gasket. And the manual suggests filling the filter half full with oil, with the new oil, before putting it on. And I'm guessing that some people do that when they change the oil filter on their car too. I never have. Not sure if there's an advantage to that or not, but I never have done it, and I've never had any problems with my vehicles. However, the manual does recommend doing that, so I am going to do it in this case. Okay, so I got the bottle opened here, and I'm going to put some oil down in here. He said fill it half full. I'll probably err on the side of less, just because I know it's going to make a big mess if I overfill it and then try to put this thing back into the tractor. So I went ahead and put some oil down in there. You can see it's kind of, you got to let it kind of soak in a little bit. And then what I usually do is I stick my finger down in the oil a little bit, and then I just take it and rub it around on this gasket. Try to make sure your fingers are pretty clean when you do that, so you don't get like bits of rock or grime on there. But that just helps lubricate things and get everything nice and tight when we get it on the system. So I'm going to go back around to the other side of the tractor and start screwing this thing on. All right, we're back here on the other side of the tractor, and I've got the new filter, and I'm going to see if I can do this with one hand easily. If you look up here, you can see where the spindle is, where this thing goes, and I'm not going to bother wiping that, because I'm worried if I start wiping it from the top, it's going to fall right down into that spindle. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is for now, and I'm going to position this right here, and then kind of just gradually put it back up here until it positions onto the spindle. I'm sure some oil is going to fall out here at some point. I'm just trying to move it around until I can find where it lines up there. I think we got it. So I start turning that. Yep, it's on the spindle. Now, you just need to hand tighten this thing. You don't want to get carried away with it. I'm not going to use the wrench. The wrench is useful for getting it off after it's been on there a while, but I'm just going to hand tighten that on there until it's nice and firm, and that's it. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cotton rag here, take the clean part of it, and I am going to just once again wipe off these little nozzles where the cooling tube goes, just in case any grime sort of fell onto those. I want a nice tight seal when I put that cooling tube back on. I think we're all drained out here from the transmission. And then next we're going to remove the fill tube on the back. Alright, so here's the fill tube. So we're on the back of the tractor now, and you can find the fill tube right here up on the top of the axle. I'm going to use my crescent wrench again, and I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. And take this off. Once it gets loose there, take it off the rest of the way with my hand. I'm just going to set that down here, and now we're going to put the cooling tube back on. So as I said, I took my cloth and cleaned this up real nice. and this is going to be a one-handed job if I try to do it with the camera, and so I'm going to turn the camera off here while I finish installing this. There is going to be some oil up in here in the tube, so what I'm going to do before I try installing that is I'm going to take the tube, come to the back here where my drip pan is, and I'm just going to kind of move this thing around to get the oil to drain out of it. Because it's all kind of squirrely like that, you kind of got to move it around if you want to get all the oil to drain out. And since this oil's not that dirty, I'm not too worried about a little bit being left in there. But you can see it's kind of dripping out. I think we got most of it out there. So I will put the camera down and start positioning myself to install this tube. Okay, so you can see here I've snaked the tube back up in here into position. It's got to go on the other side of this cable right here. And what I'm going to do is try to screw this back on while I've got the camera running. I've got the camera propped up here. So if I reach in there, just use my hand, and this time we're going clockwise. I put that one on first. The one that goes to the axle, I'm just going to kind of hand tighten that first. Then I'm going to go right up here to the transmission. And you might have to kind of bend the tube just a tiny little bit. Not really bend it, but just, you have to kind of position it right to line up. And then I'm going to do the same thing there. I'm going to hand tighten that nut. Okay. All right, I'm back with my handy dandy crescent wrench. And get the setting right here. And you don't want to overly tighten this. I just get it snug. You certainly don't want to break anything. Got that one tightened. And we'll go up here. And, actually, I'm going to get this one from the other side. So I'm back on the other side. Like I said earlier, if you remove the mower deck, it's probably going to be a lot easier, but honestly, I think removing and replacing the mower deck takes up enough time that you can just deal with the hassles here of the tighter spaces. So we're going to want to go in here and just make a snug fit. Doesn't have to be too tight. We don't want to break anything. And that's it. My cooling tube's back on. My new filter's in place. I'm going to go get my rag. And I'm going to come up under here and just wipe off any excess fluid that's spilled on the deck. Go back over here. There's just a little bit of oil here on the deck. Just try to keep that clean. And that's pretty good. So now we just need to fill the axle. All right, so I'm back and ready to fill the transmission and axle up with the fluid. There's a couple of ways to do this. As you can see, that fill tube is not exactly easy to get to. I mean, you can't really come straight down on it. It's a small tube. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you can get in there. I think the two options for me with what I have are to either use this pump, which I don't really like. I don't find it works very well, and the tube isn't exactly the perfect fit anyway. Or you can try to use one of these long funnels. So the funnel doesn't fit in there perfectly, but it fits in there well enough, and I think with my hand I can position it so that I don't spill anything out. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the funnel. I'm going to kind of put it up here and position it right like that. Then I'm going to block the little bit that's open with my finger so that it all has to go into the tube. And I'm just going to pour it right into there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it in until I see it halfway up that tube. The capacity is 5 quarts, so I should use everything I have, but I'll let you know what's left over once I'm finished pouring it in. All right, I've put 4 quarts in it already, and if you can see there, you can actually see the oil is up halfway in that indicator tube. And that's what they say in the manual to look for if it's halfway in there. Now it also says that the capacity is 5 quarts. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting the last quart in there, keeping an eye on that. And I'm guessing that some of that oil ends up in the oil filter. So and also we've got this thing parked on an incline, so that may have something to do with the oil showing up halfway in the tube there. But I'm going to trust the capacity that it's 5 quarts and go ahead and start putting the other 5th quart in there now. So I put a little bit more oil in there. You can see it's a little bit above the halfway mark, which I think is fine because like I said, there's still some oil that is going to end up going into the filter. It ended up taking about 4.5 quarts. You can see this is how much I've got left over in my last quart. A little more than 4.5 quarts. I'm not going to put anything more in it until I start the tractor and see where the tube's at, because as you can see here on the bottom it says do not overfill, pour only enough fluid to bring level up to the midpoint of sight tube, and I'm going to try to adhere to that. So start engine, allow it to run for a few minutes, stop engine, recheck fluid level, add oil if necessary. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to remove the tractor off of the ramps here, back it up, let it run for a minute, and then check the tube again, and we'll see where things are at. Okay, so I ran this for about a minute, and if we come back here and look at the sight tube, we actually can see, it's kind of hard to see with the phone, but you can see the oil did drop a bit. So you can see it right down there. So I'm gonna add more oil into it until it comes back up to that halfway mark, and then I think we'll be good to go. All right, I added a little bit more oil to the tank, and you can see here it's right about at that halfway mark, the way the manual wants it to be. So I feel pretty good about that. This is how much we have left now. So you can see it did use most of that last quart. There's only almost a couple hundred milliliters left, but I'm not going to use the rest of that because I think that's where it's at, and the manual does say approximately 5 liters, and I think it's more important that we keep it in halfway in that sight tube. So I'm going to take the cap, put this back on, kind of hand tighten that a little bit. I'm going to just tighten it a little bit more with the wrench. I don't want to go too tight on it. I don't think it's necessary to be too tight. And that's it. So let's go up here. Let's get things going. Hopefully this will start without needing to choke it. Climb up here and make sure that the transmission's working okay. Take the parking brake off. Go backwards. Forward a little bit. think we're all good. So that's it. That's changing the transmission fluid and filter on a John Deere 314.